Level 1, the Engagé Volontaire. You are standing in front of the cold iron gates of the recruiting center in Aubagne, France, shivering in the damp pre-dawn mist at 04:30 a.m. You have absolutely nothing to your name. Your past, your true identity, and your sins are completely erased the moment you step through those gates and hand over your passport. They strip you of your civilian clothes and give you a thin tracksuit that smells faintly of industrial bleach and the nervous sweat of 1,000 desperate men who came before you. You are immediately subjected to the internal intelligence branch, who interrogate you in a stark, windowless room under a buzzing fluorescent light that gives you a migraine. They dig aggressively into your past, your crimes, your crushing debts, your broken heart, asking the exact same questions for hours until your mind blurs into a static haze. You sleep on a rigid cot, staring at the cracked ceiling, listening to men from 40 different nations snoring, crying, or whispering in languages you do not understand. You are a ghost waiting in the purgatory of processing. Level 2, the Legionnaire de Deuxième class. You have survived the initial cuts and are thrown into the brutal training farm in Castelnaudary. This is where they break you down to your absolute core. Your days begin at 0400 a.m. with screaming instructors kicking over beds and the overwhelming smell of floor wax and fear. You are issued your heavy assault rifle weighing a solid 4 kilograms of cold steel and polymer that you must clean until your fingers bleed from the sharp edges of the receiver. The defining moment of this rank is the punishing 50-kilometer march across the unforgiving rocky terrain of southern France, carrying a 35-kilogram rucksack that bites deep into your shoulders, restricting the blood flow until your arms go entirely numb. The pain is a blinding white noise in your skull. Your heels are reduced to raw, blistered meat, soaking your wool socks in dark blood, but you absolutely cannot stop walking. If you stop, you are nothing. When you finally cross the finish line in the cold rain, they place the iconic white cap on your shaved head in a silent, somber ceremony. You are now a Legionnaire, but you are still at the very bottom of the food chain. Level 3, the Legionnaire de Première class. You have spent an entire year scrubbing toilets, peeling mountains of potatoes, and absorbing physical punishment for the slightest infractions. Now you are deployed to the steaming, dense jungles of French Guiana to guard the European Space Center. The humidity is a suffocating 99%, and the air constantly smells of rotting vegetation and stagnant, muddy water. You are hacking through the thick green undergrowth with a machete, your heavy cotton uniform, completely soaked through with sweat and clinging to your skin like a wet, suffocating rag. You encounter a highly venomous viper, its scales blending perfectly with the dead, wet leaves, and you freeze completely, your heart hammering violently against your ribs. You realize in that exact moment that the jungle wants to kill you just as much as any human enemy. You are hardened now, your naive illusions of romantic adventure completely replaced by a cold, mechanical efficiency. You learn to sleep comfortably in the deep mud, to completely ignore the constant biting insects, and to trust the exhausted man beside you with your life, because he is the only family you have left in the world. Level 4, the Caporal. You are the workhorse of the Legion, the absolute lowest rank of leadership, but arguably the most universally hated. You are given command of a fire team of 4 men, raw, terrifyingly incompetent recruits who barely speak a word of French. It is your direct responsibility to keep them alive and literally beat discipline into their thick skulls. The physical toll on your body is immense because you must always be the fastest, the strongest, and the most relentless man in the room. If one of your men makes a tiny mistake, you are the one who gets punched violently in the chest by the sergeant. You sleep an average of 3 hours a night, your eyes constantly bloodshot, fueled by terrible black coffee and cheap pungent tobacco. You patrol the dusty, shattered streets of a war-torn city in Mali, the intense heat radiating off the cracked concrete like an open oven at high noon. The threat of an improvised explosive device is a constant silent pressure building directly behind your eyes. You kick open a heavy wooden door during a dawn raid, the hinges screaming in protest, and your rifle raised the thick smell of stale spices and human fear washing over you as you clear the dark, claustrophobic rooms. Level 5, the Caporal Chef. You are a senior corporal, a deeply seasoned veteran who has consciously chosen to stay in the mud of the combat companies rather than take a comfortable desk job. Your knees pop audibly every single time you stand up a painful legacy of 1,000 miles marched with crushing gear. You are the undisputed master of the enlisted men, the one who knows exactly how to game the rigid system, how to scrounge extra ammunition, and how to fix a completely jammed machine gun in the pitch black of a firefight. You sit in the loud, smoky Legion bar, drinking a cheap, warm beer and looking critically at the new volunteers. They look like fragile children to you, soft and dangerously unbroken. You vividly remember a specific chaotic mission in the Sahel desert, an ambush where the air was unimaginably thick with the supersonic crack of incoming rounds and the choking, toxic smell of burning diesel fuel. You remember frantically dragging a heavily wounded comrade behind a rusted-out truck, feeling the sticky, terrifying warmth of his arterial blood coating your hands as you screamed desperately for a medic over the deafening roar of gunfire. That horrible memory is a cold, heavy stone in your stomach that you carry every single day of your life. Level 6, the sergeant, you have crossed the massive dividing line into the non-commissioned officers. You have a coveted gold stripe on your chest and a terrifying new level of crushing responsibility. You are a squad leader commanding 8 to 10 heavily armed men. You are no longer just responsible for blindly executing orders. You must formulate complex tactics while actively taking fire. The daily stress is a literal physical presence, a suffocating tight steel band around your chest. You are leading a grueling foot patrol through the treacherous, snow-choked valleys of the mountains, the air so incredibly thin and freezing cold, it physically burns the inside of your lungs with every desperate breath. The eerie mountain silence is instantly shattered by the deafening earth-shaking roar of a rocket-propelled grenade impacting the jagged rocks directly above you, showering your squad in razor-sharp granite splinters. Time instantly slows down to a sickening crawl. You hear the panicked, frantic shouts of your bleeding men, and you must violently force yourself to stand up straight into the incoming hail of lead, pointing and roaring clear tactical orders over the incredible din of battle. You cannot ever show fear. If the sergeant shows fear, the entire squad dies. You aggressively direct the return fire, smelling the sharp, acidic, metallic tang of cordite in the air, until the enemy finally breaks contact, leaving you standing in the eerie, ringing silence of the aftermath. Level 7, the Sergeant Chef, you have been bleeding for the Legion for over a decade. Your face is heavily weathered, carved with deep, permanent lines from the harsh sun and the biting wind. You are definitely divorced, or perhaps you wisely never married at all, because the Legion is a notoriously jealous mistress that accepts absolutely no rivals for your affection. You are the platoon sergeant, managing the massively complex logistics of endless war, ensuring your exhausted men are fed adequately armed and ruthlessly disciplined. You are the dark physical enforcer of the captain's will. Your heart has grown incredibly calloused to human suffering. You sit alone in your small, austere room late at night, surrounded by the pathetic few possessions you actually own, cleaning your service pistol with a slow, meticulous, comforting rhythm. You actively try not to think of the good men you have lost, the young faces fading inevitably into a collective dark blur of ghosts. You walk down to the disciplinary cells in the dark, freezing cold basement of the barracks, standing intimidatingly over a young, highly rebellious legionnaire. You absolutely do not shout at him. You speak in a low, terrifyingly calm, completely flat voice, explaining the harsh, unforgiving mathematics of survival and absolute loyalty until all the arrogant defiance completely drains from his terrified eyes. Level 8, the Adjutant, you are a senior warrant officer, the direct second in command of a massive company of over 100 lethal men. You definitely do not run as fast on the brutal morning obstacle course anymore, but you absolutely do not need to, because your vast tactical experience is an impenetrable aura of armor. You instantly know the correct answer to every complex tactical problem before the young, inexperienced lieutenant even finishes asking the question. You are a vital mentor, a dark, stoic father figure to the broken men. Late one night, in a dirty forward operating base under a breathtaking canopy of brilliant cold desert stars, you find a young, terrified sniper from Eastern Europe shaking uncontrollably after taking his very first human life through a scope. You sit down heavily beside him on the rough sandbags, feeling the comforting residual heat of the desert night radiating upward. You silently offer him a crushed cigarette, and in the glowing orange ember you tell him the absolute truth, that the crushing guilt never entirely goes away, but it eventually becomes a silent shadow companion that you simply learn to walk beside. You purposefully do not offer him empty, comforting lies, only the stoic, brutal truth of the lifelong warrior's burden. Level 9, the adjutant chef. You are a chief warrant officer, a highly respected graybeard. You are a walking, living legend within your heavily decorated regiment. When you walk slowly across the pristine parade square, all idle chatter immediately stops, and men snap violently to rigid attention with a crisp, loud slap of hands against their rifles. You have somehow survived multiple brutal wars, countless terrifying firefights, and the equally vicious internal politics of the massive military machine. Your dress uniform is totally immaculate, the creases sharp enough to literally cut glass, heavily adorned with clinking metals that tell a long tragic story of extreme violence and unacknowledged sacrifice. You spend your long days analyzing dense intelligence reports and directly advising the high command staff, but your warrior soul remains deeply embedded with the filthy men sleeping in the dirt. You stand completely alone in the silent museum of the Legion, staring fixedly at the ancient wooden prosthetic hand of Captain Danjo from the legendary Battle of Cameroon. You feel a profound, deep spiritual connection to those doomed dead men who held the desperate line in Mexico over a century ago. You finally realize that you are just a temporary, fading custodian of this massive, blood-soaked sacred tradition, just a single fragile link in an ancient, unbreakable chain of sacrifice. Level 10, the Major. This is the absolute pinnacle of the non-commissioned ranks in the entire French military, a rank so incredibly rare it is almost entirely mythical. You are a massive institution unto yourself, holding immense administrative and operational power over thousands of lives. Young, ambitious officers defer to you with a strange mixture of deep respect and genuine fear. Your large office smells comforting of old polished wood, strong brass polish, and incredibly dark, bitter espresso. You are certainly no longer kicking down splintered doors in the dark. You are now orchestrating the complex global movement of entire battalions, managing millions of euros of lethal equipment, and navigating the treacherous high-level bureaucracy of the French armed forces. Yet deep beneath the pristine tailored uniform and the endless administrative duties, you absolutely still have the exact same scarred soul of the desperate, starving young volunteer who walked terrified through the iron gates 30 years ago. You look out your thick glass window at the new terrified recruits marching awkwardly out of step in the concrete courtyard below. You feel a profound heavy melancholy in your chest, knowing exactly how much physical pain and mental suffering awaits every single one of them, knowing exactly how the massive gears of the Legion will grind their humanity down and forge them into cold weapons. You are the quiet, unseen architect of their brutal transformation. Level 11, the officer à titre étranger. You are one of the incredibly rare, brilliant enlisted men who successfully rose through the brutal ranks and crossed the great impossible divide to actually become a commissioned officer. You now command a large platoon, but unlike the young, soft officers straight out of the prestigious military academy, you have personally scrubbed the vile toilets, you have marched the agonizing, bleeding miles, you have bled directly in the dirt with the ranks. Your men absolutely know this fact, and their fierce loyalty to you borders on terrifying religious fanaticism. However, the heavy burden of high strategic command is a massive, isolating, suffocating shroud. You are sitting exhausted in a dark canvas command tent in the Central African Republic, staring blankly at a glowing topographical map on a ruggedized military laptop. The struggling air conditioning loudly hums, fighting a losing battle against the oppressive wet equatorial heat. You are meticulously planning a highly dangerous dawn assault on a heavily fortified rebel jungle compound. You know exactly what the muddy, terrifying, bloody reality of this sterile plan will actually look like for the men you are ordering into the breach. You know with absolute certainty that some of them will definitely not return alive. You must make the agonizing, impossible calculation, actively weighing human beating hearts against the cold, unforgiving geometry of the tactical objective, signing their violent death warrants with a simple, casual stroke of your black pen. Level 12, the Capitaine. You are the company commander, the absolute, unquestioned monarch of 150 heavily armed, dangerous killers. You have finally reached the ultimate summit of your long, violent journey within the Legion. You stand completely still at the absolute front of your company during a massive regimental parade, the brass band loudly playing the haunting, slow, deliberate march of the Legion. The blinding sun beats down heavily on your crisp white kepi, and the heavy rows of medals on your chest feel like an actual physical armor made of past unhealed traumas. You look deeply at the massive sea of hardened faces standing silently before you, faces from 100 different broken countries, men who came desperately fleeing, crushing poverty, violent crime, and total despair. You took them all in, you completely broke their spirits, you entirely rebuilt them in your own ruthless image. You are a recognized master of war, an elite orchestrator of massive violence, but your scarred mind is totally consumed by a quiet, strange philosophical stillness. You deeply understand the grand, tragic, bloody absurdity of it all. You have spent your entire adult life completely sacrificing your physical body, your lost youth, and your eternal soul for a bright flag that was not even originally yours, fighting dirty, forgotten wars that the civilian world will instantly ignore. You constantly feel the deep, dull ache in your worn bones, the jagged, thick scars on your torn flesh, and the heavy, invisible bleeding wounds in your tired mind. But as you slowly draw your heavy ceremonial sword, the polished razor-sharp steel flashing brilliantly in the hot sunlight, and you roar the final order to march, you feel absolutely no regret in your heart. You actively chose this incredibly hard path, you fully embraced the immense suffering, and you became a true brother in arms in the most ruthless elite fraternity on earth. This is the brutal, beautiful life you carved entirely out of the empty void, and you will proudly carry the massive, crushing weight of the Legion until your very last ragged breath.